Alright, so we read some Maskana of the Maima that the Emesa Aveda Barotzoi Vashoyi, was when the Kabbalah Seo and Al Shemayim and Ina von Hanochas Atzmusai penetrates the whole Aveda, so that even the Aliyah of Stalkis, which is the Rotzoi, even that is Bemida Nachina, and even Mida Nachina, that it won't be like the Benayan as we saw in the Pasha, Pasha Shavua. It won't be naive and Aliyah Vistalkis Lagamre, and that automatically leads to the union of the Shoiv, which is the Kabbalah Sol Malchus Shemayim, the Kiyum Atera Mitzvahs Lamater. And we saw that was the Amitias Aveda Rotzei V'Shoiv. Come to us that both the Rotzei and the Shoiv are governed by the Kabbalah Sol Malchus Shemayim, the Pnimius HaNefesh from the Adam, Levatel Kol Rotzeinei Mipnei Rotzen Hashem. In other words, that he's completely given away his whole Rotzen, even when he's in a state of Aliyah Rotzei. He's given away entirely only to which is Rotzen Hashem. And that's stuck in the Ina von Torah Mitzvahs Harayah Lamata, and then we compare it to the Ina von Eved. And that's what we see here in Samavov, that the concept of Eved keeps reoccurring from time to time. And we already had a foresight of that when we learned the Hemshech later on in the Rosh Hashanah, Tov Reisamot Zayin, further on in the Hemshech, and we saw the whole summing up of the two Avodim, the Eved Poshut and the Eved Hanemat. V'alpi Hanal, as Yuvan Mashkosu Ki Kasher HaShamayim HaChadoshim V'Oretz HaChadosho Asher Ani Oise. But we brought down at the beginning from the Novi, and the Maimah opened with the Shilas on this posik from Yeshayahu HaNovi, which he says that to get to the Zman HaGeula, and after the Geula, that just like the new heavens and earth, which I am about to make, the new heavens and the new earth which I'm going to make, are standing in front of me, literally, Oimdim Lofonai, as Kain Yamid, in the same way, Zarachem V'Shimchem, your generations and your name will stand also in front of me. So we were medactic. What is the Indian from Shemayim V'Oretz Chadosha? What does that mean? A new heavens and a new earth. And what's the Indian that Oim Dim Lefonai? And that also there's Avtocha that the Zarachem and the Shimchem will also be Oimed in the same way in front of the Eibishter Liosid. What is Kira the comparison, but the Zarachem V'Shimchem, that they will stand in a similar way to the new heavens and the new earth, whatever they may happen to be. Tehine Shamayim V'Oretz Hein Rotzoi V'Shoiv. The two expressions Shamayim V'Oretz are indicatory of the two inyonim of Rotzoi V'Shoiv. Eretz hi b'chinas Rotzoi. Now the word Eretz is indicatory of the Aveda Milmata Lamaila, the Inyan HaRotzoi. Okamaima is brought down in the Medrash, in Bereshis Rabbah, that Lama Nikro Shmo Oretz. Why was the Eretz given the name Eretz? Sherotzto Lasis would say, Koino, that the earth wanted to do the will of its maker. And there's also another implication that it ran to do. Rotz can also have in itself the implication of running. Sherotzto Lasis would say, Koino, like we see at the beginning of the creation, that the earth was bottled completely to the Avish. It was only at At a later point, there was a slight shinui beneged to the bringing out of the trees of the whole union, but Rashi brings down in detail over there in Pasha Bereshis of the etzem union of the earth per se, as it's called Eretz, because there was a rotzoi and a running, they call it an enthusiasm in the very essence of the earth to carry out the will of the Eibishter. Or we find another pasuk in Tehillim where it says, "B'cha arutz gedud," literally, in you I will run like an army. Yeah, arutz, what a gedud means, a regiment or a group of fighting soldiers. So that's indicatory of enthusiasm and how they call it, zrizos, energetic movement. And therefore he uses the expression arutz gedud. I will say you run in you and towards you like the swiftness of a military parade or a military group. So we see that the word arutz is very similar to the word eretz. So we see on that like the Midrash says, that the word eretz is like a form of adjectival or adverbial form of the word rotz, which means either to want or to run. So that's therefore the word eretz is indicatory of the wanting and the running, with that scene of rotzoi going out milmata lamaila with the tremendous enthusiasm and swift movement. What that's seen from rotz, as we saw. Ve'ilu shamayim ubchina shamayim, interestingly enough, indicates the union of shoy. Ki shamayim haim b'chinas mashpiyim. The whole union of the heavens is that they are mashpiyim, v'hainu b'chinas amshochas mad, and that means the union of the derivation of mayin tchulim. Mad is an expression of Kabbalah used in the Zohar Kodesh, brought down the Kisvei Arizal. Mayim tchulim, literally male waters, inyonim which are nimshak milmaila lamata shalidei kiyum atera mitzvahs shozer b'chinas shoy. What does that mean? That the union from rotzoi is what we called earlier haloah, going upwards to milmata lamaila. And that's called Maim Nukvim. That's called man in the Lashon of the Gemara, because that's like the arousal of the receiver milmata lamaila. Nukvim means the union of female. Ve'ila the union from mad, that's the masculine concept. The union from ashpoa milmaila lamata. And that comes as a result of the halos man, the going upwards, milmata lamaila. And just like we see that's the way the Shomayim function, that the clouds and all the other inyanim in the Shomayim, they come about through an arousal of heat or intensity from the earth, and that gives off vapors and nochazor inyanim, what that causes an aliyah and a form of clouds and other materials or other condensations in the heavens, and then they return and give down ashpoa milmaila lamata. Right? We see it's brought down at the end of the Torah in the brachos of Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu says, "Mimeged shomayim mi'al," that the blessings at the heavens from above, and that they help and they assist all the growing down here on this world, all the flocks, crops and other inyonim, or they grow mitzad the ashpoa of the Shomayim darki. So therefore the Shomayim are the union from mashpiyim. Ve'ila, the union of the earth, is the arousal of the makabel milmata, the arousal of the makabel lamata lamaila, which invites and calls out and requests the ashpoa milmaila lamata. Well, those are the two inyonim of rotzoi v'shoy. So the Rebbe says, Bekitzer, that the Shamayim are the union from mashpiyim, and like we just described it at some length. V'hainu, in Ruchnias and in Pnimis ha'inyan, that's the amshachas mayim techulim, or that's the ashpoa milmaila lamata that the Eibishter gives down through the union of Kiyum Torah or mitzvahs. In other words, when Yidden are Makayim Torah mitzvahs lamata, that causes a certain aliyah and a certain haloah, and then the Eivshe gives down the oiros elyonim which are nimshach down into the world through the union for learning Torah and keeping mitzvahs, what does the union of the hamshocha milmaila lamata hamshochas mat. והנה זה שייך עכשיו בעבודה בבחינת רוצוי ושואיב בכוח עצמוי ויגי עושי. He said that is shaykh now in the Seder, how it is now prior to the coming of Moshiach, that there's the two inyonim of Rotzoi v'Shoiv. Vadim van Haloa milmata l'mayla v'amshocha milmayla l'mata. Like we saw in the whole Maimah, that's Davki b'koyach atzmei v'yigi yosef. Because the Shoiv, the Rotzoi is b'vadai, Einin that he makes milmata l'mayla, Davki b'yigi, is what we saw in detail in the Maimah, and then the Shoiv is also Davki בכוח עצמי, לקבל על עצמי, להניח את עצמי, על הצד, הנוחס עצמוסי. What is מקבל על עצמי, to carry out Rotz and Havaya with the union of self-nullification and bittul of Gomu, what he comes down into the world, Kabbalas Hamalchus that we saw, Kabbalas El Malchus Shemayim, and that's the union of a tremendous yagiyah and effort on the part of the mensch, both in the Rotzei and in the Shoiv. Although particularly we saw that the Shoiv has got even more yagiyah and even more Koach Atzmi than the Rotzei. So therefore he said all of those inyonim are shayach nowadays, because that's the Seder, Rotzei Shoiv. And it's all in the Koach of the Adam to do it. Avol al li osid, but on the time of the Geula and after the Geula, in the world that will be li achrei ha-Geula, Oimer ki kasher hashamayim achadoshim va'oretz achadosha, the new heavens and the new earth, asher ani oiseh, which I'm about to make. Deli osid yeh gamkein b'chinas rotzei v'shoiv. Ali osid there'll also be a form of rotzei v'shoiv. Avo yeh mitzad atzmas ein seif. It'll be mitzad the very essence of the Eibishter, how he is, mitzad himself, in Atzmusay, that will be the inyan of Rotzei v'Shoiv. V'zeh asher ani oiseh, that's the pshat that I am going to make. I will make this inyan from Shemayim v'Od. I will make the Rotzei v'Shoiv. Mil, she'ani she'yeh arotzei v'Shoiv mil ma'ila. So immediately the intelligent reader immediately stops and jumps at the obvious question: how is a child to say Rotzei v'Shoiv milmayla mitzad atzmo sein seif? How can the Eibishter want to go into himself as different chayet? And what's the whole union from Rotzei v'Shoiv if it's milmayla and it's bi atzmo sein seif and mitzad atzmo sein seif? Mele, we talk about Lamata in Olam Hazeh, or in the Elamas Nivroim, so then the Nivroim are there in a state of Rotzei v'Shoiv, even the Malachim as we saw, in a state of Rotzei v'Shoiv, because they're Nimtza Lamata and they want to go up and outwards to Atzma saying, Ein Seif. Or if you're talking about in the very essence of Hashem himself, how is Shai to say that he will make Rotzei v'Shoiv, what does he want, what is he going towards, and what is the taste that he's coming back to himself? Was it a shayach b'chlal davaka kazeh b'frat? The whole union from Rotzei seems to be completely out of the. You can't want to go into yourself. If we're talking already about the self, which is atzmas, you will attach Rotzei. So therefore, the Rebbe puts in brackets, an immediate tikkun lazeh. That's what he writes in brackets. Okay, inyan bei achido and bei lahita. Commission is poor liu, but Tibu Maschu Vayechulu Ashamai. Now I don't know if there's anybody here, probably one person, as far as I know, who was here when we learned the Maim of Vayechulu Ashamayim, that was eating from Shabbos Bereshis. Maybe you were here then, I think. This when we learned you were here also. When we learned the Vayechulu Ashamayim, maybe I'm not sure, but you El Chaponim. when we learned that Maimah of Bereshit, we just see what a situation where we're faced with, people don't even remember Klau, whether they did or they didn't. This was the Gredel HaTzar VaTmiyah. People don't remember the heck to what's the event, to what's the niche event. Anyway, we have to go further with the hope that and it'll be good. One of the great things about a Yid is he always believes. The Tachlis tell you that it will be good, even better than what it is. In other words, he has to believe that everything's good. He always has in himself the Hanocha, that's the time, even better. So those are the pshat. It's the time good, and the time will be even better than what it is now. So maybe that's being also not particularly optimistic, because who knows how good it is now. What exactly the matzav is beregezeh. However, we have to hope, even if we're not batuach, we have to have the even hope, as is for time good. Edifar, what did he say over there, the Rebbe? He brought down a whole big Indian beneged to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. That's what the Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is well known, that he was from Madrega Gavoya Ma'id, being the Megala of Pnimis HaTorah. Amongst all the Tanoim, he was one of the few that in Yonam, well, he was probably the only one that Ikar in Yonam was in from Gilad Pnimis HaTorah, even though we find a Ribui Otzum of Inyonim in Nigla the Torah, also Alidei Rabbi Shimon. It's brought down in the Siddur that the great Chiddush of Rabbi Shimon was the Gilad, the Pnimis HaTorah in the Nigla the Torah, and even separately the Gilad, the Pnimis HaTorah Mamish, but it was the Tzibur of the Zohar HaKodesh, which he and his son were Machaber, and they discussed and drew up all the Yeseides during the time that they were in the Meiros, one on the famous story Bezer V'chulu. Erefa, the Indian of Rotze V'shoiv, how it is Milmaila, is called over there, and that Maimah Moti V'loi Moti. I don't know if that term, which means literally reaching forth and not reaching. Moti V'loi Moti is brought down in the Arizal Barichas in the Eitz Chaim. What it means is that the Talder V'Diyin, we described that that's a Madregas HaKeser, and not the unit from the Esser Spirit, or Tavki the Madregas HaKeser, and Keser is the unit from Rotzen. So Rotzen is a Gilui of the Etzem. Rotzen is what we call Amshochas HaEtzem. It's not shy to talk about just a oil going off from the Etzem in Rotzen, like we do in all the Madregas of the other Spheres and all the Oilemas. Even the Oilemas Ha'ilyonim above Atzilas, we talk that they're Oires. The Ilu in the Indian von Rotzen, we say that the Indian von Rotzen is the Gilui or the Amshocha of the Etzem itself. So what happens is that the Gilui HaKeser is a Gilui of the Rotzen, how it was Miyuchad and Batil B'tachas inside the Atzmus, and then Kaviyachol, the Atzmus himself, is Nimshach, but even Musuyam in the Indian HaKeser, and it's only what we might call a form of a Yerida or Yetzia, because you can't really talk about, as we said, the Etzem going out from the Etzem, but you can say that the Etzem leans forward or allows itself to be Nimshah. And so that's called the Indian of Moti. And then we say that Loi Moti, that means that reaches. Loi Moti is exactly the opposite. Loi Moti is that immediately, that which one say immediately, you can't talk about time gaps, Lamaila, having been Nimshah, that then goes back in, it's withdrawn back into the Etzem Mitzad Etzem Inyone being as it is, the Atzmus, then it tends to go back promptly into the Atzmus from whence it came, and that's called Loi Moti. Loi Moti meaning it didn't reach, didn't touch. So there we see that the inyan, the shoiv and the rotze are in an opposite order to what they are lamata. In the inyan from lamata, first of all, rotze aliyah klapi maila, and then shoiv derivation mil maila from the mashpia to the makabel. The ilo dot, it's on the opposite side that there the Atzmus gives a certain you read of a natia from itself, klapei, koto klapei the makablim, and then it goes back it's withdrawn back into the Atzmus from whence it came, and that's called, as it were, rotza kaviochel. Well, that's even from the aliyah v'stalkes or the gilui etzem back into the etzem, and that's called shoy v'rotza or motiva v'loy moti. So there we see that the Seder is afuch from how it is by the Nivroim. And even though that moti, v'loy moti, is the source of what causes in the Nivroim the whole inyan from Rotzoi v'shoiv, it's like a choisam mishapei. When you have a choisam, how do you call it, a stamp, then you got the letters in the stamp, but when you put them in the shaiva, you push them under whatever they push them, they reverse. They go around the other. Way. Therefore, when lamaila, the rotze v'shuv, when it causes its resultant effect lamata, then it's the other way around. It's first of all rotze and afterwards shuv. Well, that's called a choisam hamishah. The inyan from choisam hamishapei. But many of the inyanim how they nimshuk no maila can be even kozeh. However, it's a form of Rotze v'shoiv, but it's not the emissary in from Rotze v'shoiv. It's like a nasinas koyach mitzad the atzmus, that there can be the in from Rotze v'shoiv in the makablim how they are in the olamas lamata, that are makablim from the atzmus and the rotzen of the atzmus. And those are called moti v'loy moti. So the Rebbe explained over there that Rebbe Shimon was on such a high madrega, and his whole devekis in Elokuz, and his way of teaching, his way of understanding Torah, and his whole connection with Atzmus say through the inyan of Torah was on such a level that he learned things, and he was megala how they are mitzad mil maila. However, the Zohar Kodesh brings down about him that he was makusha and bound up to Hashem with one kesher. Bechad katira is katan mabei, that I was bound up to him. It's written right at the end of the Zohar Kodesh. That's what Rabbi Shimon said about himself, that he was bound up to the Eibush with one knot, as it were. So it's brought down in Siddur, that's even from Yechida Shebanefesh or Lamaila, even more higher than Yechida. Or that was the Etzem Mishkashis of the Nishama in Elokus Mamish. And so therefore, a little bit later on the next page, it's written that Rabbi Shimon said about himself that he said that his oifen of learning was mitzad the way his neshama was, and he said that his neshama was bei achida or bei lahita, or sometimes quoted the other way around, bei lahita and bei achida. In other words, that I was flamed literally in him. I was like a flame that burnt me back into him, literally bei lahita. And then Bei Achida means that I was literally one with him. I united with him. I was literally one inside him, as you might say, the whole time. Bei Lahita v'Bei Achida. So the Rebbe brings down over there what are those two expressions, and what do they add to the Bechad Katira is Katana that's brought in the first statement. So the Rebbe says that the Bechad Katira is Katana, that I was bound up with one kesher, one knot. Well, that's the Etzem Mishkashis of the Neshama in Atzmus Saint Sefer. By Rebbe Shimon, that was his whole way of living. He didn't kill on to go all the other madregas of the Neshama, how they come down into Gilu in the Guf. No, Philly was in the Guf. That's what he was zeichet to that Oifen, a Gilu Nishmatzai. And therefore, his whole way of learning Torah was Bei Lahita and Bei Achida. Dahainu, that there was a certain Gilui coming forth in a form of Iskalas Mina Etem, and then it was Bei Achida, it went back immediately into the Etem and united with the Inif and Atzma saying, Ein Sei. And therefore we find that everything he said was in there, even from Sidus Noiroim, that that's just like a Gilead the Etem, and it was very difficult for the Maccabean to really know what it was all about. And only a small and Miktus Miseh was known to the Maccabean, like he writes himself at the end of the Zohar Kodesh. And there was a little bit was Nimshach, but then it withdrew again into the Indian of the Atzmas. But that's the Indian from Torah, Atzmamish Miyuchad, like we saw Barichas Gedolah in the Maimonium earlier. The Gila Tainu, what Tainu is its Indian is Kavalus, but Techaetim. Well, that's the whole Indian of the Gila, how it's going to be Liosid Love, the Tainu with the Avist in the Torah, how it's going to be Mishkala Liosid Love. Therefore, it was in a state of Beyachida, like united in the Etim, and more the Indian from Tainu than the Indian so his Galas Mamish Lamata. And the Yosid Love, that's the way we're going to learn Torah, which is going to be the Gila of the Tainu, what he called over there, the Atzmus, Tainu, Aposhut, with the whole Arichas that we learned earlier in the Hemshah. And that was Rabbi Shimon, that was his life. And therefore we see that there was in Atzmas a form of Rotzei v'Shoiv, of a Fakir. It was in him from Shoiv and Rotzei, but it's purely Mitzadi Etem, and it's only a Gilui b'Miktas, and then it's Niklal b'Chazor in the Atzmas, and that's the Indian of how it's going to be Rotzei v'Shoiv Liosi. That even Halimud will be Mitzadi Atzmas Atainu. There'll be a certain Gila, and that's what we call over there the Atzma Tainu Alchoponim. That's Murchav B'Yezishu Indian. There's a certain what he called over there Ha'orav in the Atzma Tainu, and then that's the Indian from the Amshocha, and then there'll be the Indian for what he calls over there the Shashui Mamela B'Atzmusai, the Aliyah of the Tainu Mamish into Atzmus Ein Seif Kipshutei. Learning Torah how it is mamish mitzadi the etcher, and those are the two inyonim of Bei Achida and Bei Lahita. So he writes over there, the Rebbe, that Bei Lahita is really the shoiv. That's it going out from the atzmas, and it becomes like a flame. It goes out, and what is mizgala from how do you call it, the gachilas, the coal. It goes out a little bit of a flame, but it's still united very much with the coal. Or that's the union from Bei Lahita, that's the union of the Gila. Al-Kaponim Azish union from Gila by form of a flame, and therefore it's called Bei Lahita. And Bei Achida is when it goes back into the Atzmas. In other words, like he brought down over there, Barichas in the Maimon from Teil is that there's a certain union of how the Teil's coal inside the Atzmas, that's like the flame which is inside the coal, and mamish miyuchad inside the coal, and then there's a certain trace of it which sometimes appears on the outside of the coal, and that's your union of blowing it. If you blow slightly, then the flame appears, it pops up slightly at the top, and that union from the blowing, that's the union of the speaking and the usage with a pure mouth and everything, and the union from Divrei Torah, well, that causes a gilui of the union of the flame, how it's kol mamish inside the coal.
It's lechita. That it. There's the two. Achida and lechita. The two. Lechita. Is that the separate? What is that actually referring to? I'm having a hard. Is that the separation or the connection? Because it's not exactly in it, so it's connected.
I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, we went into Barichas. What we said was that lechita is the gilui from the rotzen. B'miktas al-chaporim, there's a certain yerid of a gilui. Okay. And that's called lahita, like the flame, like the flame that reveals from the coal. And achid is when it goes back inside.
Okay, so it's that.
Back inside the outside. And that's what we just described the whole mashal. And that blowing through the breath of the speaking in Torah, if it's done by people they learn purely the Indian Torah, then that causes a certain Yetzirah Legilu.
Okay, Yetzirah. Okay.
Yeah, certain Yetzirah Legilu, but that's the Indian from Bei Lahita, and that's the Indian of Shoiv. But the Indian from Rotza is the Bei Achida, that it goes back into the earth. And that's the opposite of how it is down here, like we pointed out at Samay. From that, it follows that's why I said it's going to be Shomayim v'ha'oretz al-chadosh. It's going to be a new form of Rotzei v'shoiv, because it's very different, and it's hafuch we'll all say the Rotzev Hashoiv is now, and that was Rabbi Shimon, that he was zeicher to learn on such a madrega, that he was already b'madregas liyosid. Love it. He already had the whole Indian from Gilu Torah. How it was mitzad the etzem oinig, like we said, his skull is back into the etzem, or that was the etzem atainu gaposhut, and so on and so forth. Therefore, that's the what the Novi announces, that the Novi is Mavaser, and he tells us the news that Liosid, there is going to be Rotzev Hashoiv, but it's going to be even for Shamayim V'or, it's Hadosh, different than it is now. The Indian for Moti V'loi, Loi Moti, and that's Mitzad the Indian for Atzmas. Therefore he said that's going to be Mitzad Atzmas Ein Tov, the Rotzev Hashoiv, how it'll be Mitzad Atzmas Ein Tov. V'yoyma alzeh, and in reference to that, he says, Kain Ya'amay Zarachem Vashim, that just like that is going to be standing in front of me, it's going to be mamish in my atzmas, and the whole inyan from the Rotzev Hashoiv is going to be purely how it is mitzad the atzmas. What derech agav, that's as we pointed out, the inyan from first of all Hashoiv and then afterwards. So it's interesting. It's brought down in Torah Oyer and also in Likutei Torah. It's brought down that in Emerson Adugma Mizeh we find by the Odom, we say that for example the union of the beating of the heart, for example, that's called the union for Rotzev Hashoiv. In other words, that the heart expands and gives forth blood, and it retreats back into itself. How do you call it?
Contracts.
It's mitkavet. How do you call it? It shrinks. Was. That's always moving the whole time. But that's a dogma from the union from Rotzev Hashoiv. And similarly, we have the union from breathing by the mensch. Also, it's a tenor going upwards and a tenor going downwards. Union from Aliyah, union from Ishtauk, union from Shoiv. And all inyanim in the whole world, all function on the union from Rotzev Hashoiv. Therefore, we see the yam. The yam is also comes in and it goes back out. So it's all the inyanim function even for Rotzev Hashoiv. The Alter Rebbe points out that the defikus alei, and he said that's what they call pulse. That's the union of the, it's called in medical terms, the union of the pulse is also when the doctor holds your pulse, he feels like how do you call it, a beating movement. It's called the defikus. It's called in Kabbalah Lashon defiku de libo, the like the knocking of the heart or the beating. In English they call it the heartbeat. The beat. It's like a movement of back and forth. So the Alter Rebbe points out that in the infant defika de libo, we find a similarity, the way you can look at it, to how it is really lamayla. And that's the union of the Odom being like in a dugma, how it is really mitzad. You have the nasa Odom betzalmeinu kid museinu. We see by the heart there's a certain union. First of all, the gilead of the chayas in the heart. First of all, a union from yitzia, as it were, and ispashtus, and then a union from withdrawal the kibbutz. In other words, first of all, the heart gives forth a certain leaning of all the blood and things it has, and then it withdraws and goes back into itself. And that also leads to the union from breathing and to other unionim in the body that also function. But even even though the union from breathing is already more like it is in the world, and in the Makar it's more like you go first of it, and then there are more of these talkers and afterwards the union from Yishashvas, which is the union from Shoiv. Over here the Alter Rebbe is medaki in Torah that the union from the Leiv is more like first of all giving forth and then a returning. And he says that that's mamish bedugma from the union from Moti v'loi Moti, and that's like a giving of koach within the Odom B'klal, the whole union of Rotzev Hashoiv bedugma how it is in Yonim Lamayla. So that's the union with Reb Shimon. He was zeicher to be on that madrega of Bei Lahita and Bei Achida Mitzadi, the fact that he was on such a high kiruv to Atzmasei Ein Tov, and he was so botel, Lagamri to Elakus, to the Rotzen Ha'elyon, and therefore his whole limit was in even for how it's going to be Liosi, as is well known, that he was Bedugmas the union of the limud, how it's going to be le'achai Mashiach will come. And there was the Kedini from Soid and the from Pnimius, and Rabbi Shimon saw through the Soid all the Inyanim how they are in Nigla. That's Mamela, as the Alter Rebbe tells us in Tanya in Geras HaKodesh chapter 26. Well, that's how it's going to be the Inyan of the Yediyas HaTorah, the Yediyas HaInyanim Liyasid Love. They will know all the Pnimius, and Mamela will see, and it'll be clear to us what all the Inyanim are in Nigla. And in reference to that, the Novi says, Kain Yamei Zarachem Vashim, just like the Rotze Vashoyev is going to stand in the Eivishter, and it's going to be Mitzadi in the Eivishter, in the same way, literally your seed and your name. So he said that Zarachem Ubchinas Azriyo Shalidei Torah Umitzvus, Bchinas Oya Zaruala Latadik. ושמכם הוא הנה קבורס אור מלכות שמיים וכמוי ויעש דוד שם והיינו דוד דאחשו בקבורס אור מלכות שמיים וקיום התורה ומצוות יסעלו גם כן ליוסית בבחינת עצמס אין צי פורח ואין צי פורח הוא. In other words, that Kain Yamoid, even though they're not going to be Shaykh Lapoyel, it's going to be a whole other Seder. Of all the things that we've done now, is Kilo, it would be the impression, if it's all going to be with a complete different Seder, then all the Inyanim which we've done for our Torah mitzvahs and all the things we've prepared and all the things we've done through the Rotze Vashoyev that we've been doing, that's all going to be lost. Because it's going to be a new Rotze Shoiv, which is purely mitzad atzmus ein tov, and another madrega altogether. So he said, no, therefore all that we've done, Bisman HaGolus, is going to have a tremendous aliyah, and the Eibusha will take that into the whole new Seder, and he will reckon it as if that's the way we've been doing it the whole time, as you might say, and he will then bring into that whole new Seder all that we've done. In other words, that all the Inyanim we've done all the years, we will be zeichet to see all that mitzad, how it is mitzad atzmus ein tov, and to literally to gain the reward, as it were, gain the ashpah of those inyanim, how they are bepnimis ashur shaleim in atzmus ein tov. In other words, that all you've done is you're going to get it all back, as we brought down in Chassidus, but you get it mitzad, the madrega amiti is how it is in atzmus ein tov. Because you might have thought, well, since it's all going to be in another Seder, it's all going to be mitzad the atzmus, then it'll just get, as it were, forgotten in the new Gilui. And he said, no, all that we've done won't be forgotten, but it'll all be oila into, and Hashem will literally translate the coinage, as you might say, into the whole new Seder, and we'll be able to see how everything we did, prepared and built and made possible, all of that Gilui, and then we'll also gain, as it were, what you might call the Sachar, but that's the Inin from Sachar, which is going to be Liosid, and then there's even a higher form of Sachar, but that's not the place to get involved in right now. So it says, the Rebbe, Va'ima al zeh kein yamid zarachem v'shimachem, zarachem, that's the Inin from sowing, literally, or putting seed, shalidei Torah mitzvahs. Well, that's what we say in the famous pasuk in Tehillim, Oya Zarua La Tzadik. Tzadik meaning he who keeps Torah mitzvahs. Tzadik is an expression, generally speaking, for somebody who does the Torah and the mitzvahs. Amech Kulam Tzadikim, all Eden are Tzadikim. Mitzadinim from Torah mitzvahs. Then there's a Oya Zarua, there's literally a Oya which is sown, sown from Lashon sowing in the ground into the Torah mitzvahs that we do. We'll soon deal with that in a second. V'shimchem hu inyan kabbalah seo malchut shamayim. But that's the doing of the mitzvahs here, lamata mamish b'kabbalah seo. More or less as we've seen throughout the latter part of the Maimah. U'kamoi vayas David Hashem. But that's a pasuk in the Tanakh, the Alter Rebbe in Geras HaKodesh, chapter 5. He's got a whole big long piece over there on that pasuk, Vayas David Shein. And the diuk over there is Vayas, that David being the Inin for Malchus, what his Inin is Oil Malchus Shemayim, Ba'aveda, he made literally a name. He made a name. And the Alter Rebbe brings over there that that's a very high madrega. It's the Gilui Kaviyochel of how the Eibusha calls himself on Yidden his name. But just like the king, all the subjects of the king are called Al Shem, the king. In other words, they're so bottled to him that they become like him. And that's the Inin of the Shem. And by Yas David, that was precisely through a Inin from Asiyah. And over there, the Alter Rebbe connected with the Inin of Tzedakah, like we saw in the Chittas, in Netanya the last few days, in chapter Lamed Zayin, the tremendous mile of mitzvahs tzedakah, of giving tzedakah. The Alter Rebbe is mavai over there through the pu'ula of mitzvah. What giving tzedakah requires a tremendous Inin of Kabbalah, because you have to give away everything, well, not everything, but you have to give away whatever you earn, and you put a tremendous amount of effort, and that's your livelihood, and you give it away in the form of tzedakah, then that's a tremendous Kabbalah sale, a tremendous biro, klali in the whole world, like we saw in Perek Lamed Zayin. I mean, you guys learn Chittas, I hope. The whole big arichas, but the Alter Rebbe is mavai over there in Perek Lamed Zayin. Well, I can see from the slightly doubtful glances from one to the other that maybe you don't. But that would be a tamir gedola, a kliya atzuma. Shei Kamoyo, Chas V'Sholem, Bochesel, gefunden sich in the Tomchei Tamim from the Rebbe, not learn at least the Tanya, Chumash, L'chol HaPachis. However, that's what we had Barichas in Perek Lamed Zayin, in the Chittas, Beneger to the Mile of Mitzvahs, the Tzedakah, and that was the Inin from Kabbalah Sel Malchus Shemayim, and that's a in Davki in Asiyah, B'Poel, in doing Lamata, and that's Vayas David Shaim. So we see then that we got these two inyanim of Zriya and Asiyah b'Kabbalah Sel Mamich. So if I would have thought that there was some sort of a enthusiasm and a follow-up to all these inyanim, then I would have been mavai that in a little bit more bapratias. Well, since I see that everybody just sitting and schlepping along, and who knows, most you don't come to say to Chassidus in the morning below over here. Some do, and some don't. Some do come sometimes, some don't come sometimes. And so it's a big pele, whenever do these inyanim really get implanted in your minds. When I mentioned a mime of an Yichula Hashemayim, no, that's something better, everybody's never heard of such thing. It's a little bit, disarming. It would seem that this machine is really the one that gets all the details, and who knows, what really goes on with the Makablim. Therefore, it's a shiloh where it's worthwhile going into the different diyukim in the Indian, because who knows if anybody really repeats these inyanim or really gets them or pays attention to them, particularly that it's always a different story. Every time I say that little page, it's always some people were there and some not. It's never possible to say that there's 2 weeks where it was the same, that everybody appeared for 2 weeks or even for several days. It's mind-boggling.
It's worthwhile.
Huh?
It's worthwhile. We should go into it with the beer.
Yeah, you're trying to be humorous.
No,
is that the idea?
No.
No. So you show up at Tzedek Chassidus in the morning and you really cock yourself in it, and then we'll think whether or not we should go into it.
I will. Yeah. We should go into it and then I'll come to Seder.
I see. Well, up to now we didn't go into it. That's the implication.
No.
No, so what is the damned implication? What the implication is that you've got to get out of bed and come to Seder. That's what it means. That is the implication. So what is the implication of the senior from Zarachem v'Shim Shimchem? What we would have wanted that to be once again the Inim from Rotzoi v'Shoiv on the part of Lamata, and the Alter Rebbe said it's not. He said it's the Inim from Zriyo Shalidei Torah Mitzvahs, and then he said to Kabbalah Seo in the Inim from Torah Mitzvahs. So both of them are the Inim from, and that's what he goes on to say. V'hainu avida da'achshov v'Kabbalah Seo Malchus Shemayim v'Kiyum HaTorah u Mitzvahs Yisalu Gam Kain Liosid, Bepinas Atmas, Ein Sei Poro, who it'll go up into the Infa, and it'll be there in the Infa Atmas, it'll be Miskala to all those who've done it, like we described just now at some length. Why does he say the Inif and Zarul Tzadik, the Zriya at the Inif and Torah mitzvahs, and Kabbalah Sel Malchus Shemayim in Torah mitzvahs? Look, that's both Torah mitzvahs. I would have expected that he would say Kanye, just like the Shemayim V'or, it's just a new Gile of Rotzev V'Shoiv, the Zarachem and Shimchem would also be the Inif and Rotzev V'Shoiv. And he says a different in it. He says that Zarachem is the Zriya of Torah in Torah mitzvahs, the effect of limud Torah in Torah mitzvahs. And then he says that the infant Shimchem is the infant Shem, or that's the infant Kabbalah Sel Malchus Shemayim. What is vital, the infant Torah is once again the infant Torah mitzvahs. So why doesn't it in some way link up with the union of Rotzev Shoiv that we're talking about in the Pasuk? So we have to say that we look up in other places, in Torah and other places where the Alter Rebbe talks about this union, also in the Kutei Torah about it. And from all the Rebbeim in different ways they deal with this particular Amida of the Shem and the Zera, how it's going to be Li'osid, L'gabe, the Moti V'loi Moti, the Rotzev V'Shoiv Adis Mitzati Etzem. What it comes down to is like this: that there has to be at the beginning on the part of a mensch what we call halos man, as we said before. Well, that's the rotah going up, no matter mailo. We see that the infant rotah is how the autumn tries to struggle to go upwards, no matter mailo. So it's put down in many places in Siddhas that the mensch, being as he is in a Guf Gashmi and in the Nefesh Abami is, and he's in the Olam HaGashmi and the Olam HaChumri, if he makes a halua, then it can't really get very far into the Olam Elyonim because it's full of all of his, as it were, trace of Gashmiyas and things of that nature. And therefore, if a mensch does Torah mitzvahs without any real pinimis, without any real devotion to what he's doing, then it remains to a certain extent down in this world, as you might say, putting it in a rather blunt way. And therefore the infant Rotzoi is very important, and as we said, you can't really have Shoiv without Rotzoi, and there has to be the infant Rotzoi, because when you go up and you yearn to go up and you yearn to get out of the world, well, that purifies what you do and your Avodas Hashem, even your learning Torah, and even all that you do apart from the actual Rotzei, which is mainly in Tefillah, that purifies everything and throws off a lot of the Chumriyas and allows the Aliyah to begin into Emesa, Aliyah into the, what you might call the Olam Elyonim, like the Alter Rebbe brings in Tanya, Perek Tesvav. And Tesayin that he brings it every day, what a person does, mitzvahs with Ava, even if it's only Ava Tivias, anyway for Mitzad the Nefesh, if it's not really Ava that he worked out, then it elevates his Torah and mitzvahs into Olam HaYetzirah or into Olam HaBriya. If you looked over there and Tanya, if you ever notice, there's a big arichas, he says that you elevate your Torah and your mitzvahs to a certain Olam. It's a point of Kibita what's for Olam, what type goes up to them Olam, or if it's Ava Tivis, it goes into Olam HaYetzirah. It's Ava that really came inside his bonniness, it goes into Olam HaBriya, L'chayr Ma'inaf Kimina, B'dvarim Ha'ila, you did the mitzvahs and you did the inyanim. But so there was a huge arichas over there in Tanya, but it goes up to their Olam, and it's Mishachet with the spheres in that Olam, and then maybe it can be Oila, but Rachamim Gedolim into another Olam. Ma'inaf Kimina with it. Oh, that's what the Alter Rebbe points out. When you do something else Adam, then all the, what you might call, all the strings and the tails of your life in this physical and Gashmistika world, they all hold it down to a certain extent. And therefore you have to have what's called Rotzah. And that Rotzah is what he calls over there in Tanya, Avos Hashem, and Yiras Hashem. You have the infinite emotion and koch that you want to be close to Elokus, you want to go up. That elevates what you did to a higher level. All that you put into, that goes up into a higher level. And that's what he said over there in Torah, that the rotzei is a birur. The fact that you have rotzei, that's a form of purification of all you did in Torah and mitzvah. That's why it's so essential. Because otherwise you're never really going to get anywhere if you don't have a rotzei. Like we said, you just stay down on the... Sometimes stay down on the ground. And that's what you see, the famous Maaseh. What happened with the Baal Shem Tov, I already told you this, Maaseh. And then it's difficult to even be Messiah, if you remember, from one time to the other. We told you the Maaseh about the Baal Shem Tov. He once went in to daven mincha in a shul, and he said he would go to the Omud and the whole thing. And then he said, no, he can't daven mincha at this shul, I have to go to another shul. So all the Talmudim said, what's such good with this shul? So the Baal Shem Tov said that unfortunately all the tefillahs are still, down on the on the floor and on the benches of the shul, and he can't get past it all. It's too much. There's no time. They were in a hurry. They had to daven. He said he can't do it in this shul. So he went to another shul, and it appears that it was better in the other shul. Peter said, if you don't really have any real rotzei, then everything just sort of stays, as it were, lamanta. And therefore, the etzem rotzei itself is a form of a birur. But it's put down in Torah Barichas, in Pasha Miketz, and other Inyon Beneged to Yosef Atali. And then there's another birur. There's a further birur, even after you put in your av, yira, with all this thing, and your rotzei of a sof, that's a rotzei of a human being. That's also a av which can't really get up into Olam Abriya, Chayzit world. Yeah, therefore you have to have a certain, what's called Yerida of the man before it's ever the Yerida, before the real Yerida of the whole man, and it comes down and helps the rotzei to go, up. And that's called the inyan from man, mad hamavaras haman. That's the mad, which is, that's called, considered birur sheni, a second birur. First of all, you make your own birur, and then kilu mumayla, they put down this hand, they help it up. They help it up to the top. So the shaila is, how do you get to that? How do you have the zchus that the Eibusher will send down this divine help to help your rotzei really get up to the aim where it's really going? Well, that's if you learn a lot of Torah. If you put your mind into Torah, and you learn Torah together with your rotzei, dainu, you learn siddur and pnimis of Torah, other inyanim in Torah, and you have this burning desire to get into Torah. Not just to sort of be here, and I did learn a bit of Torah, and I packed up and I did something else, but you're mamish in Torah, and you live in Torah, and that's your whole life. So that causes that the Torah literally helps you out. It makes this man, because Torah is also milmayla matter, and it comes down and helps up the rotzei to reach a place, and that's called zriya. That's called like sowing in the ground and helping it to, as it were, grow up. In other words, that the Torah comes down like a thing that's sown, but it sprouts up and goes upwards and helps everything to go up. So that's what he means at Zarachem. In other words, the Zarachem is like the hemshech of the rotzoi. It's like the hemshech of how everything you've done in your Torah mitzvahs, through the av that you have for it, should be able to go up eventually and reach its whole right tachlis. And that's like, as it were, the outcome of the rotzei b'tzad ashleimus b'dover. And that's the inyan from zriya, zarachem. Shimchem is even higher than that. Shimchem is, like we said, the melech calls his name on you. You become the person of the king. He calls his name on you. Vayash David Shem, that David made a name for himself, that the Eibusher Kaviohu called his name on him and on the whole Jewish people. And that's the inyan when you give yourself away, anochasak musi, when you give yourself away completely and utterly to him. Well, then that causes that there's another mad which is nimshah, not just in order to purify your man, but a new mad which comes down and makes mamish dira petach to him. And that's the inyan from Shimchem. And that's all achieved now, even in this Managolas. We achieved that through the two inyanim of Zarachem ve Shimchem. Oh, but Liyasid Love, the whole thing is going to be purely mitzad ha'atzmos. Motiv aloi, Loimoti. So you might say, well, all this tremendous effort that we made with the Zarachem and the Shimchem, we got up into the Olam, it's all going to be, as it were, not really next of anything Liosid. It'll be like small change. And therefore it says the Eibishter promised. He said, no, just like I'm going to make a new inner, and that's Mamish Lefonai, that's Mitzad Ma'atzm, V'ani I'm making that. In the same way, I will cause Zarachem, what you did, and Shimchem, what you did in Kabbalah, I'll cause that to stand in front of me in the same way, and it's much in certain places, and even maybe with a certain chavivus and affection on the part of the Eibishter, because it's like, as it were, it was the old sweat and toil that was done by the Nivri himself in a time when it was difficult. Hainu Bismana Hagolis, it's going to have a certain affection, and that's the promise of the Novi. Kain Yamoi Zarachem V'Shimchem. And that's what he said. That's even from Zriya. That's literally the planting on the part where Zarua Latzadik, that somebody made an effort to keep Torah mitzvahs as perfectly as he could. Then there's literally a hidden divine light which sows itself into that and helps it grow upwards, literally. V'Shimchem hu in Kabbalah Soyo Yastovit Shei V'Ainu Davida Diaksho. Kabbalah Soyo Malchus Shemayim V'Kiyum Torah mitzvahs Yisalu Gam Kein Liosi. The Eibishter will take that up also inside him, into the Atmos, and he'll consider that that's also mitzad his doing, as it were. And on the contrary, he'll have a certain milah even more than the motiv aloi motiv. So ki kasher shamayim achadoshim liyes the ike v'tachlis ha'aveda hi liyes rotzei v'shoyim davke. That the Ike Tachlis Aveda mean now, in the Zman HaGolus, that there should be the Indian of Rotzei V'Shoiv, as a Uliosid Yeh Gamkein Rotzei V'Shoiv. The Eibishter's not going to take away Rotzei V'Shoiv. There's always going to be as it were, a movement, a going and a coming. There's always going to be. However, he said, Avuyeh Mitzad Atzma Seirein, Seiparuhu, but it'll be purely Mitzad the Atzmas, like Rebbe Shimon. He was already there to have it even Bisman HaGolet. Rebbe Shimon was a long time ago. I mean, it's a long time in the Golet. Rachmani Nitlan. The Farah, the Bakosha, and the Taika is that Adma Sai. The Farah said, the Rebbe, Avu Yeh Mitzad Atzmas. So Hashemayim V'Od, Asher Anioi. So that's the new Shemayim V'Od, what the Eibishter is going to make. V'chein Yamei Tzarachem V'Shimchem. The Aveda, the Bechinas, Rotzei V'Shoiv, the actual, or that Rotzei V'Shoiv, what we've had to do. The struggling upwards and the sowing downward to help the Rotzei the whole time that it should go up. Tisale Gam Kein Li Osi Bechinas Atzmas, the Eibishter will take that up into the realm of the Atzmas, and he'll give it the same status, and maybe even a more higher and wondrous status. However, he certainly won't allow it to be lost. No, on the contrary, it'll be, as brought down, that's one of the inyonim in Tzcha Mitzvah. That's what the author brings at the beginning, Perek Lamed Zayin. But he says Tzcha Mitzvah, that the Tzcha, the Mitzvah, the Etzem Mitzvah itself. Alidei, what you did, the Mitzvah, that itself prepares you the whole Sachar. It's not that the Mitzvah is one thing and the Sachar is a Nageh. It's only that he brings down in Perek Lamed Vov, and the Agur, there is going to be another Sachar, which is going to be apart from what we prepare in Torah mitzvahs. That's going to be only Le'achrei Elef HaShishi and Davki in the Elef HaShvi, with the whole Riches Ha'inin over there. I brought down the famous Hagor in Perek Lamed Vov. What the old Rebbe says, that there's another form of Schar, but that's going to be, we don't know what that is, and that's going to be a Schar Shaloi in the Etzem Mitzvah itself, and that's going to be a Schar what David is going to pay. But even Mufla, She'ein Areh, L'mayla Mikola Aveda. Over here he means how the Aveda itself is going to be Nisale, and that will be a tremendous Guru, Mitzad Etzema Aveda, and that's what he says, the Yinif and Sachar Mitzvah. Mitzvah, that the whole Inyanim are going to be Mizkala Mitzad the Mitzvahs, Liosi. That's the Seder, how it's going to be, and Pink to say by all Inyanim in Kedusha has no end. It'll go on, and then it'll be even higher in Yonim with some rooms in that Hagorim Lamavor. That will go even into higher Madrigas and in Yonim Adain Sefer Adain Tachlis Mamish. It's a man that the Shaila Adma Sai the Lama Mashiach Adain Loi is Galev Loi Bo. The answer to that is to try even harder and even starker Yechia Melech HaMashiach, right? And to be Mufasa and to talk about all the Inyonim and to be Megala them, to people, etc., etc. Even though you make yourself slightly unpopular sometimes, because people tend to be they like to stick to the so-called old ideas, you don't talk about Mashiach, you're not too crazy about Mashiach, like the Rebbe said, like this. So therefore you sort of play it very calmly, and you don't talk too much about this, you don't talk too much about that. And in a way that's appealing to people. They say, well, these guys are sane, they don't go out of the kelly, they don't talk much about the Rebbe. The Rebbe is also in touch of that's it. Keep it to it. So what can we do? We just have to be a little bit unpopular occasionally. Marshall, so. I saying kind of mochim lahari, I kind of mochim lechikones, leinian tzeh. I had a remus about it the other day. That there are certain places that they don't talk about Mashiach, and they said, they put a chair, they got plenty of people. There are all sorts of nice inyanim and that. What's it you guys put here making yourself? Yaitzim min haklau, v'chuliver, v'chuli. What can I do? I can only ein lanu ela divrei ben Amram. We have only the words of Moshe Rabbeinu and Melech HaMashiach. Moshe hu goel Rishain, hu goel Acharein. It's kein tia lanu b'poel mamish and take it from Yad mamish. And it's one on the mamish is a Rosh Hashanah where everybody knows what the Rosh Hashanah is. You know what the Rosh Hashanah of mamish is? Are you serious?
There are a few things out there.
I'm sorry?
There are several things involved from the letters of Mamish, aren't there? Mamish, isn't there anything else?
What did you say?
Several Rosh Hashanah, several things that Mamish stands for.
Oh yeah, yeah, you're right. But I mean, in our terms, we know what the mamish is.